Hi, I'll try and keep this rant short. Syria, internecine, cruel, murderous, hateful, horrible civil war going on in Syria. Do you know, I was so upset about it that I wrote out a large cheque for my hard-earned money, which I sent to Medecins Sans Frontieres to provide relief for the wounded and the injured and the sick and the homeless. That's how upset I was about it. Should we intervene? Well, on what basis should we intervene? Because there are some photographs of children who've had their heads blown out and been gassed. Well, lots of children have been killed in the Congo and in Darfur, and they're equally dead, but we don't have any photographs of them. Also, they were black kids as well, mainly. Not sort of light brown or white kids. I'm being sarcastic here, by the way, and cynical perhaps. I could make a video half an hour long or longer on reasons why we should not invade Syria, but I'll just briefly go into a few reasons. Firstly, look at the record of the West invading, interfering in other people's civil wars, particularly in Muslim and Arab civil wars. Not that good, really. There is an argument to say that if NATO, the Western forces, had not intervened on one side in the civil war in Libya, then we wouldn't have had the Syrian situation. I've listened to some interviews on the radio with people representing allegedly the rebel forces in Syria. It's a complicated and heterogeneous group of people. We don't really know who they are. We know that some of them are international jihadi Islamists funded and trained by Saudi Arabia, and there is an argument to say that what's happening in Syria is a proxy war between the Iranian-led Shiites and the Saudi-led and funded Sunni Muslims. There are a number of arguments for not getting involved. One of which, and this is going to sound incredibly cruel, I don't mean it to be cruel. If anyone wants to accuse me of cruel, tell me how much money you've given for the relief of the poor people out there before you tell me I'm cruel. One reason is to say, look, okay, whenever the West intervenes, we're accused of being crusaders and Zionists and Western imperialists. But as long as Arab is killing Arab in an Arab versus Arab, Muslim versus Muslim, and of course Muslim versus Christian war, because the Syrian Christians, like the other Christians in other Middle Eastern countries which have undergone a revolution and war, they are suffering horribly. While it remains an Arab versus Arab war, it remains an Arab versus Arab war. They can't blame us. The only way they can blame us is saying, oh, you should have jumped in and helped us. Hey, why didn't you do that? When there was an armed rebellion against the government in Libya, hey, NATO jumped in and helped the rebels against Libya. So why aren't you helping the rebels topple Assad's government? You helped us to you helped the rebels topple Gaddafi. Why don't you help us topple Assad? So a number of years ago, when I was a student, I got interested in reading about the history of revolutions. I studied a number of revolutions: Spanish Civil War, French Revolution, American Revolution, a number of other revolutions, and I formulated a sort of, well, we'll call it a joke if you like. I'm not claiming to be a history student. I only read a dozen or so books. I formulated a law of revolutions, or theory of revolutions, that in a revolution, a tyranny is replaced after a period of bloodshed by another tyranny. And the second tyranny will usually be more firmly in place and more difficult to get rid of than the first tyranny. Oh yeah, and also there'll be probably poverty and disease outbreaks and probably a foreign war. Anyway, I'd done all this, for what it was worth, and then the Iranian Revolution took place and it followed exactly that pattern. The Shah was a bad bastard, yeah, but guess what? After a period of bloodshed, the Ayatollahs took over and they were worse. And because of the instability, Saddam Hussein took this opportunity and attacked a weakened Iran. So we had the Iran-Iraq war, which cost well over 1 million lives. and has left the world a more dangerous place. The invasion of Iraq has cost at least 500,000 lives and left the world a more dangerous place. Our intervention on behalf of the rebel side against Gaddafi has cost I don't know how many lives, but left the world a more dangerous place. And what's more, the fact that the West intervened militarily to help Gaddafi, I believe there is a strong argument to say this emboldened the Syrian rebels to think that if they attacked Assad, and then Assad responded, okay, what do you do? What do people like Assad do if rebels attack his forces and then hide in built-up areas? Well, guess what? These people are not Christians. They're not Western. They're not very civilized. They will attack the rebels in the built-up areas where they're holding out. And guess what? Sometimes people use children as human shields, and then they photograph the dead bodies of the children and say, oh, the West is standing by while all this is happening. Send your fighters, send your drones. All of these are good reasons, plus the fact that our armed forces, after the events of the last 10 years, certainly Britain's armed forces, are run ragged and fought to a standstill. We haven't got the troops to intervene. We haven't got the money to intervene. It won't do any good. And to finish up by saying that I think the people who gave encouragement to the people who started this civil war in Syria, in possibly hinting or suggesting that the West might help them, I think they have a case to answer. I'm just going to finish by quoting a doctor friend of mine. I'm not going to name his name. He's an Iraqi-born doctor. I remember him saying with anguish, he said, why Tony Blair invaded Iraq? George Bush is idiot. We all know that. But Tony Blair, he's educated man. Why he do it? Why he do it? In Iraq it wasn't democracy, but we had water, we had electricity, we had education, and you could walk down the street without being murdered. That's what Iraq used to be like. That's what Syria used to be like. If there's a hell, and I believe there is, because Jesus said there was, then I think the people who are primarily responsible for this civil war in Syria will be going there. And so will, I think, anyone in the West who actively pushes for us to get involved, because our involvement can only make a bad situation worse. God have mercy on all us sinners.